What makes a man or woman toxic? Please sit back and enjoy this audio discussion recording. Table Chatter presents Open Table Discussions. Tonight's question is, what makes a man or woman toxic? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because so often we hear about toxic masculinity, and then you always have a group of people who say that toxic masculinity doesn't even exist. And then you say it does exist, right? Because people are toxic. But then ironically, you almost never hear about, you know, women being toxic or women having female toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call that, right? So I just wanted to kind of address both so we could kind of define what it is and how do we know it when we see it and how we can avoid it. So that's kind of like an open question today about that. So what I'll do is I'll go around the table and I'll give everyone like literally a minute just to give your initial thoughts on it. And then after everybody gives their quick minute thoughts, then we'll dive in and we'll get into it. All right. So, Ty, start us off, and then we'll go in the same order that we went in previously, and then after everybody give their initial thoughts, we'll go in. You could call on people you want to rebuttal and things like that. All right. So, start us off.
What makes a man or a woman toxic? The first thing that comes to mind is a friend of mine that I have. It's like this off and on friend that I have, and she is like a complainer. She likes to like I've come to realize that her like a comfortable place for her is complaining, and she will just tell the story like there's just so much redundancy, and she's telling it over and over again and still complaining. And the reason why she resonates with me is because of something that my grandmother told me when I was young. For whatever reason, she told me this, and like it stood with me, which is, like as long as you're complaining, you're not coming to a solution, you're not finding a solution. And it's like I never realized that lesson so much after, being friends with this girl. So, what could make a woman toxic? Redundant complaints.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for giving your quick initial thoughts on it. And I agree with that. That is a toxic trait for both. Raquel?
Okay, so for me, I think like two people that I feel embody toxicity, especially right now, I'll say Jada Pinkett Smith, and I'm also gonna say Future. So I give a male and a female because like when you're looking at like especially with Jada, like it's like every month she chooses like let me embarrass this man just one more time. Like let me do something. Like what can I do to one up what I did to him already? Like someone that always finds some type of way to complain or some type of way to just really bring a person down and then wrap it in a bow in spirituality. Like try to make it seem very like they're really into spirituality and all this other stuff. Like, girl, you toxic and you know it. And I'm over her. So yeah.
Okay, that is an
Um,
interesting one that we have a lot to say about that one. Can't wait for us
I'm
to
gonna
dive into that. Um,
I'm gonna step up for a little bit because I think I might have to step away for a little bit. So I just
okay, no
want to say
problem.
real quick, yeah, sorry if I'm messing up the order. But one thing I could say is that this is a very interesting topic, and I think that when it comes to like toxic toxicity. I think a lot of people have a lot of like past trauma, right? They've been fighting with, been battling with by themselves. They never actually get the help that they really need. So whenever they really get with somebody, or it could be just a friend, it doesn't have to be like a relationship, and they just kind of like literally just want you to just understand them, or they want you to just kind of like deal with them, and they never trying to actually trying to change their ways to see things in a different point of view. They kept holding on to whatever happened to them, and that could bring a lot of, you could be very toxic towards anything that you attract, anything that you come around, like friendship or family or even a relationship, is because I feel like a lot of people are systematically broken. Like they came from so far. It could be like a home that they never really get love from. They never like they never learn how to smile. They don't learn how to say thank you, and then they just kind of like be that way. So that's the only way they know, and they refuse to change that. So if they get with somebody, they just want you to just deal with it, and that's it. But they never trying to find ways to really like change and see things in a different way. And because of that, and sometimes that could be very detrimental into the friendship or the relationship. Because I had a girl I dated before, and she was just so like she had a heartbreak so bad to a point where like she just refused to let go of any like, whatever happened to her. And then with that being said, it's like I try my very best to kind of like make things better, but she just kept holding on to whatever it was, and things just like that, and the relationship become very toxic because of that, And she just, I don't know what it was. It just she never really kind of like get the help. She never broke into tell me exactly what happened so I could help her. She would just become that person who just like she was just so bitter, and. So, and I feel like those are the things that could make somebody really toxic. And another example that I have a friend of mine. She went to a party, and then she was sad that she was raped at the party. It was like a friend, and then she didn't know. Like she got drunk, she passed out, she woke up, everything was fine, and she found out she was pregnant. I guess like 4 or 5 weeks later on, and she backtracked to find out what happened to her was that day at that party. She went to the police, made the report. She did everything that she could, and they could never find who did
Wow.
what. And
Yeah.
she never really got any justice from that. So she ended up aborting the baby. So after that, every time around that time, she kind of like go ghost. Like she just kind of like crying. Like she kind of like she felt so guilty the fact that God would never actually like forgive her for aborting the child, and she probably would never be able to kind of like conceive any kids. And from that day on, she just hate men in general. She's terrified of men. So even if you try, and she's a beautiful lady too. Like if you're trying to talk to her, like she will literally kind of like blow you off. Like, and somebody like that could come out really toxic because of that. So I feel like overall, what I'm trying to say is like I think a lot of past, like your past trauma or your past life have a lot to do with you being toxic, or not. So that's just my take on it. So sorry if
Okay.
I'm kind of going all over the
Not,
place.
it's cool. Come back when you can. I know you said you gotta go, but I am taking notes of what everybody is saying. That way I can refer to it. So, hope to see you back. And,
Of course,
thank you for your contribution.
no problem.
Um, Watson, what are your initial thoughts? And then, Pierre, and then Rock, and then Kelvin.
Okay. All right. For me, what makes a man or woman toxic? For me, is that Peter Pan syndrome. It's that that refuse to grow up thing, that grow up thing. Because for a lot of people, and the reason why I say I talk about the lack of growing up is because a lot of people have this idea that that along the line of what Zeza said is that what happens to you is like, oh, something happened to me in 1999, therefore I can hold on to it on in 2021, and it will justify whatever it is that whatever I do, however I choose to be, and it's like, you're not special. And I say that because a lot of people think that like this, their circumstances, their situations, their trauma is like is special. It thinks oh yeah, that makes me okay. That makes it okay for me to be however I want because I went through such and such. When in reality is we all go through shit. Like the way you went through it may not have been the way I went through it. The way I came out of it may not be the same way you need to come out of it. But the reality of it is that's life. We go through shit, things happen to us, and then we go from there. But for some people, it's like they get to the point where they take that victimhood and they love it so much. It's so comforting there because if they get out of that stage, if they get out of that victimhood, then they realize that they now have to either heal from that trauma or fix their shitty character and or just not have a crutch to hold on to. Like somebody's like, oh well, my parents never hugged me when I was a kid. It's like yes, but you're 44, so what the fuck is going on? So it's like and it goes along the same line with a lot of people will have. I know I'm like saying over again, but it's like people will just have this thing where they want to take everything about them and make it seem like it's special. Like whether it's a trauma, their accomplishments, whatever it is, it's not. You're just we're all just going through the same human experience. We all just go through it differently. That is all. So that's why we the what I think makes somebody toxic. And the second thing is people who don't understand emotions. Like people think like oh because I feel it, therefore it makes it a fact or it makes it okay for me to act, say, and behave however I want to because I feel something. It's like in reality is emotions doesn't tell you the whole story. Emotions is just how how you reacting to it or how you're feeling at the moment. But emotions like if you cannot filter your emotions through logic or through through something else through like specific situations or etc. If you cannot do that, then that's a problem. So when it comes down to it, I think people who doesn't understand the emotions or refuse to like accept emotions for what it is, I think that definitely makes people toxic because then they could justify everything that they do through whatever their emotion is at the moment. Well, I was happy, so I did this. I was angry, so I did this. I was sad, so I did this. So I think that's another thing.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. That was a lot, but good stuff though. Pierre, what is your initial thoughts? Please try to keep it to a minute so that we could like actually get in.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. My initial thought: what makes a man and woman toxic? I would say two things: the lack of accountability, and also always playing victim. I'd say those two things would make a man and woman toxic,
Okay. You said I'm writing down lack of accountability. What was the other
and
one?
always playing victim.
Always playing victim. All right. Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Kelvin, you came a little late, but you made it we still at the beginning. So, what is your welcome to the table? Glad to have you back. And what are your thoughts? What's your initial? You see the question, right?
Yeah, what makes a man or woman toxic?
Mm-hmm.
My take on it is that there's two types of toxic people. There are the toxic people who are toxic everywhere they go, meaning it doesn't matter if they're in this relationship or another, they're just going to always repeat the same bad behaviors everywhere they go. And then there's the toxic people who are only toxic because even if their partner isn't necessarily toxic, they may just have a partner who's able to trigger a part of them that makes them, just bad. So, meaning when you were with this girl, you wanted to beat her ass and you did. But for some reason, when you got with this other girl, you stopped being so violent and you weren't so angry all the time. I don't think that's like the usual. I'm not even trying to say that. I think if you're someone who beats one woman, you should probably fix something within yourself before jumping into something else. But I've also seen that with people where it's like with this chick you're violent and you guys want to scrap all the time, but now with this one things are normal and you're just hanging out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's that, and then there's the guys who are going to be toxic no matter where they go.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you for sharing your initial thoughts
Mhm.
on that. And
Thank you.
Bianca, welcome to the table. Mute your mic, Kev. Bianca, thank you for stopping by. Glad to have you here. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the question, but it says here, let me click on it. The question for tonight is, what makes a man or woman toxic? You know, because you always hear about toxic masculinity, but there's also toxic femininity. So I would like you to give your quick thoughts in a minute or less on what do you think makes a man or woman toxic, and then after you give your thoughts, we'll dive in. I got a lot to say.
Okay, hello group. Basically it's I would say that it's anything that is it's a habit of having unhealthy ways, like a pattern of unhealthy ways in handling situations for a man or for a woman. And I guess it's using what would be considered masculine or what would be considered feminine and using that in a very manipulative way or a harmful or unhealthy way. So I guess that would be what toxic would be.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Um, okay, a lot has been said. Does anybody want to specifically call out anyone or piggyback on anything that anyone said? Mhm.
I will say, one of you guys mentioned something about how depression and poor mental health and personal issues doesn't necessarily make you special, and that can be a problem. Um, and so that's interesting for me because I don't really assume that about people who have bad mental health. I think um, people with poor mental health aren't like this to be special. It's that, you know, their mental health shows how it shows, and I just don't think that it's about being special ever. Uh, but I do understand that there's like a selfish nature that shows face sometimes that I've seen. Um, but yeah, I would just like to ask for your take on it. Why do you think mentally unhealthy people might consider themselves special? When and how?
Okay. I believe I was the one that was saying that. That was
Yeah.
saying something similar to that. And I wasn't necessarily talking about people with like like with like specific mental health issues. The thing I was talking about is people who have the Peter Pan syndrome where they don't want to grow up. And a lot of times, what I was talking about in that particular manner is the fact that a lot of people think their trauma or their hardship or what they went through make them special to the point where it's like they can use that forever. They can use that forever going forward. Like no matter what happens to them, it's like, oh well, I went through this when I was 17, therefore I'm like this now at 40. It's like you are not in control of what happens to you. Absolutely not. And then I would never tell somebody like oh, I would never tell somebody like oh, that they weren't a victim of of the situation or what happened to them. However, and this is the part that I cannot emphasize enough. There is a wide gap between fault and responsibility. It is not your fault what happens to you. Absolutely not your fault. Sure, there are things you could do to put yourself in certain situations where things happen to you, but it is not your fault what happens to you. However, it is your responsibility on how you deal with the things that happen to you. And what I was saying about that is the fact that I see a lot of people refuse to do that. They refuse to accept that, they refuse to take the responsibility to heal themselves from what happened to them or to work towards, a solution, towards getting better from it because they're addicted, to the victimhood. They're addicted to being a victim because they know they can use, that, being a victim forever. They can use that to, like, to justify everything they do going forward. So it's not so much about like the mental health, like having a specific mental health issue, but rather about the fact that some people think that having or the circumstances or the situations that happen to them, it makes it okay for them to justify whatever happens going forward. Well, how they move going forward. That was most of my take on it.
Calvin, you think that makes sense? Do you,
Yeah,
what?
I hear him, and actually, yeah, that does make some sense in the sense that man, like I'm trying to verbalize right now how I take that, but I do agree with him to an extent, and so I hear how yeah, dealing with your traumas and your issues the way you do, that does oftentimes define who you will be um, in any situation, um, for sure. I
Okay.
just
Well,
don't know if also we can say that that's always going to be your fault because some people just don't even know what their own triggers are. They're still trying to figure their shit out.
that's definitely true. You know, I am optimistic of like the next generation only because
Word.
currently there is you're starting to see more of an awareness to to deal with your traumas or just to get see a therapist and to deal with your mental health. I feel like this is a relatively new awareness that's on the rise that we didn't have like 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Not even 5 years ago. The push to see it, I mean, there's always been therapists, right? But the way that it's being pushed now and is becoming more normalized, especially in the black community, I think it's a positive thing. So hopefully, as we become more aware of our triggers, even the word trigger, that's for me, that's a relatively new term where it's like you're more aware that there's something that can literally, put you in a certain type of mood. So just being aware and, seeking therapy, I think that will help the
Yeah.
next generation.
And I hear you, man. I do remember those days when trigger was not a word. Oh, my bad, King. Go ahead.
And
Oh
anybody
no
else
no
could jump
oh
in
no
too.
no
I know it's been just
oh
you
no no
two.
it's fine.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say because I was gonna say, Greg. I feel like our generation handled or are handling depression and I guess you could say toxic environments more or better than this generation coming up. Even when they have therapy, they're telling them to go to therapy, seek professional help. I feel like we've handled that situation better because growing up, you didn't necessarily hear about depression, us being depressed, the suicide rate being so high amongst our generation when we were growing up. Now it's just like it's out of control. So that's why I would say we've handled that situation a little bit better than the upcoming generation. Although they have access to like a whole lot of stuff.
um, one thing I wanted to say about that is, and I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but I think what I'm very grateful for what's happening now, like in terms of what Greg said, the fact that mental health is becoming more of a more of a concern. People are paying more attention to it and stuff like that. But what I fear, and this is I guess along the same line of what I was thinking about, is the fact that a lot of people now can almost like take that and abuse it to the point where they be like, oh well, it's because it's because for my mental health, my mental health, and then they use that as a way to just stay confined, stay like completely away from people, stay away to themselves in terms of like to stay in a cocoon, to like, oh, to protect my mental health, I'm going to avoid the world. It's like, so a lot of times I feel like, and that's the thing that concerns me, is the fact that I feel like a lot of people now will take that to the extreme because there's always extremes. There are people who say, oh, oh, you're depressed. It's okay. Eat something or pray about it. You'll be fine. But then there's a side that says, oh, I'm depressed, so therefore I will not do anything at all because of that. And I feel like, and my concern is like, hopefully we don't fall too far to that extreme, as opposed to the extreme we had before, where mental health, talk was taboo, and we never even talk about it. So I just don't want, I just don't want the new generation to fall into the other extreme of that. So that's my only like concern about it.
Right, right, right. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Ladies of the at the table, what are your thoughts on?
I thought that Zeza said it best. In that toxicity it, comes from, um, oh man, I forgot.
He said unresolved past traumas.
Yes, yes. So the point that I want to make is that we all have trauma. Like every single person in the world has a past trauma, and that we all have toxic moments. And I think that the difference is what everyone else is saying. Are you able to pinpoint that in yourself and decide to get help, or decide to just stop, or, you know, take that look in the mirror and examine yourself and say, what I'm doing to my loved one, my spouse, whomever, is unhealthy for them and for me, and I want to change. I think that's the difference with toxic people. Some people can identify it and decide that they're not going to do it anymore, and some people, like, it's almost a place of comfort for them. They are comfortable in that toxic place, and they want to complain, and they want to be, negative, and, however many people they can pull down with them, the more the merrier. So I think you have to be able to be one of the strong, more mentally strong people, and identify that those negative characteristics within yourself and do something about it.
Well said. Well said. Raquel or Bianca?
I definitely agree with everybody, especially when I'm seeing a lot of people using their um, mental health, like Winston said, as a crutch almost. You know, I think that's gonna start being a problem because a lot of people are using it and abusing it. Like if you're not willing to get help, you shouldn't be in certain situations. Like for example, if someone is like, especially during relationships, like you can't keep telling me like, oh yeah, I went through this in my life, so this is why I act this way. And when you want to have a conversation about it, like, hey, like, do you want to work through it? Do you want to? And it's like, no, no, no. I want to sit in what happened to me. Like, I'm gonna stay here. Like, that's super toxic. Like, people that just want to sit in what happened to them and don't want to grow from it or fix it in any way, shape, or form. Like, I, I, that over time becomes a super toxic trait. So I definitely agree with Wetson when he said, like, a lot of people are gonna start using that as a crutch. Like, I
Facts. And I'll let Bianca give your thoughts, and then
I agree with what Wes. I came in the conversation a little late, but I agree with what Wes and what Kelvin were saying because they both bring up two different perspectives on it, but it's like of great concern. Like with Wes, with what he was saying, it was like people using it as an excuse. That's basically what people are saying. It's not like they're special, but they're using it as an excuse. Oh, this is why I'm this way, or this is why I'm that. And Kelvin on his side was saying about people who are actually, who actually they are experiencing mental health, and some may not know that they have it, or they're trying to work their way through it. So you're going to have some people who, yes, they're dealing with mental health, but some of them may be aware that they're dealing with it and they're choosing not to do anything about it, even when there is actual help available. They're just choosing to be a victim instead of a survivor, and just stick with, oh, this is just how I am, and just stay there. So it's a great concern for both because I can see a lot. I already see a lot of people out here that are choosing to just go ahead and say, oh, well, this is what it is, and just choose to either self-medicate with drugs or what have you, and as opposed to actually getting the real help that they need. And then I've also seen people who are actually experiencing mental health and they unfortunately don't know, and they're really trying. So yeah.
But that's the thing about, I want to make a distinction between toxic and people with mental health. Um, but that's the thing about toxic people. Sometimes it's like you can't tell them they're toxic. Like we're all seem to be, the general consensus in this group is, figure it out and get help, right? But it's like, that's so difficult to tell a toxic person. They're not, before they even go get help, they're not even agreeing to the fact that they're toxic. And I'm saying this because the friend that I mentioned earlier comes to mind. Like, there's no way I could even possibly have that conversation with her. I could try, but it would just be one big toxic conversation. It would just be, it's like me agreeing to have an argument with her, that she's never going to agree to the fact that she's toxic and that she needs help. So that's a good question. Like, how do you talk to a toxic person and tell them, number one, this is your issue, and number two, I think you need to go get some help.
I mean, at the end of the day, like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But the more, I think the more conversations that we have, like everybody was saying, we're talking about it more. So there are more signs, and there's more like, if you're going through this, are you feeling this way? And that person, with time, hopefully through if having a friend like you or someone or just on their own, can come to grips and have like some type of a, come to Jesus moment, as they say it, and just say, hey, I have a problem, or let me see if I can try this, and then reach out for help. Because at the end of the day, you can't make somebody, acknowledge something. They have to
Right.
come to it on their own, in their own time.
I'm gonna jump in real quick. I just want to welcome Antonio to the table. Antonio's been a long time table chatter member. He's been in the in-person meetings. He's been in the group for a while, so happy to have you here. Antonio, do you see the question that I posted? And if so, what's your quick thoughts on what's your answer to the question?
First off, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Um, I think when to answer this is it really is. I don't know if it's been said already, but it really varies. When you talk about what makes a man or a woman toxic, it really varies from person to person because, especially in the black culture, since we've had so much pain put upon us, a lot of things that we just accept as normal behavior, and that's just us, is actual toxic behavior to other races of people and just people looking on the outside in. So when we talk about what makes a man or a woman toxic, it really does definitely vary. But I personally think a lack of kindness and actual care for your fellow human being makes somebody toxic. When people say and do things without a care, and I'm not talking about, oh, well, again, in the black community, that's celebrated as not having a filter. Well, I don't got a filter, so I just say what's on my mind. But it's also, sorry you weren't raised right, because certain things just shouldn't be said. This is, of course, my opinion. Certain things just shouldn't be said, and that's how I was raised certain times. And that's, for me, that's what makes a person toxic, is really just them having no regard for others around them. And really, and then when you bring it to them, like it was just talked to, just talked about a second ago, when it's brought to them in a nice way, they talk to you, they pull you aside, and then they have a bad reaction to it because they're being told someone else's truth, and just being completely ignorant to someone else's way of being as being something that they should actually, adhere to. So yeah, to me, that's toxic.
Thank you for sharing that. One question that I have is, that anyone can answer, or all of us can answer, is it's just curious. Why is it that we always hear about toxic masculinity, right? But we never hear about the term toxic femininity. Why is it always just put on the man, like it's only guys that are toxic, and we don't hear about it on the other end? Not trying to start a fight, but it's just an observation. It's like, how come it's not like an equal term that's used for both sexes?
Because it's never been socially acceptable to hold women accountable, opposed to. Y'all should have told me my mic was moving. I was having a whole other conversation. Um, but like I was saying, it's never been socially acceptable to hold women accountable for their actions. So that's what I would say. That's why you see the attention is geared towards men more often, because it's more socially acceptable to hold men accountable opposed to women.
I disagree with that. Women have been held accountable throughout history and for centuries. So I disagree with that. I think the reason why we hear more about toxic masculinity is because we hear more stories. We see more of it in men. It doesn't mean that women are not showing their behind, some of them or whatever. But we tend to see it more so in men, and that's where the term was created from, out of that. And then from that, then of course men were probably saying, hey, there's some women out here doing some things too. There is such a thing as toxic femininity. And I would like an example of what toxic femininity is, if anybody wants to give one.
I think that
Yeah, I'm gonna
also
give you
says.
an
Oh,
example.
sorry.
Oh, okay. Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Raquel.
No, no, no. Continue. Give her example.
So, resentment being one, bitterness being another. That's I guess you would
That's
say that's a
those are
Everybody
toxic.
those are
experience
those are
those.
everybody
Thank
has
you,
resentment and
Antonio.
bitter. Come on, man. What are we
Mm.
talking about right now? Like, like let's give us. I'm waiting for Black. Please give us some real like examples of
I'm gonna give you an
feminine
example, right?
feminine.
I'm gonna give you an example, right? So resentment. What I mean by resentment, right? Let's just say there's a couple, men and women. They have a child together. So with the resentment plays a factor in. Let's just say something were to happen between the couple. So the resentment part would play in, where that woman wouldn't necessarily let that man be involved in his or her child's life. You understand what I'm saying? That's a toxic trait.
So you call that toxic femininity?
Yes, you would consider that.
I
I mean,
mean,
we can't
okay.
let's define what
Uh,
toxic femininity is. I'm not
please,
saying
like
that,
I
Pierre.
yeah,
I'm not
because
saying you're wrong or right. I'm just, but maybe if we could come to an agreement on what the definition is, maybe it will make more
But
sense.
Greg, what Black the example that Black just gave is based on the fact that 99.9% of the time, the person that has access to the child and has the child is the woman instead of the man. If that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't have that be able to be an example. It's the same thing as saying toxic masculinity is women being catcalled or women being raped by men. It's not that men don't get raped by women. It's that the majority of rape victims are indeed, women by the hands of men. So that's why we can, label that a toxic masculine trait is the raping of women through history, right? And then when we talk about like a woman keeping, a child from a man, that is something that is, is can be pegged as a feminine trait when realistically there are men that actually do it too, just based on the relationship that they might have with the mother. But I understand what Black was saying.
Gotcha. I had it in front of me. I'm trying to pull it up. The definition of female, or
I'm
feminine.
wondering. I'm
Yeah, go
wondering
on.
why toxicity is gender specific at all, right? Like whether you're a male or
Hmm.
female, you could just be toxic.
You
And
know why I think it could be gender specific is because men and women display their toxicity. Yes, there's a middle ground where there's some commonality between the way that it's expressed between men and women, but then there are certain traits that's gender specific. So I'm trying to figure out, I want us to, maybe something we could collectively come to agreement on. What are the specific things of each gender that makes that gender generally,
See,
because generally,
yeah, yeah, we got to be talking about
toxic.
generality. We
Yeah,
got to be
yeah.
talking about generality.
Generality. I think there are some general things that we could probably put a finger
Because a
on.
big thing is if you're a man and you're emotional and you're in touch with your feelings, then you're really not a man. Then you're being feminine, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. When everyone has feelings, even animals have feelings, but for men, it's seen as a feminine trait. So now we got to talk about the generality, and a lot of stereotypes that are put on men and women as a whole, especially in the Black community.
Yeah, yeah. Does can anyone think, or yeah, can anyone think about any traits of toxic femininity? And
I see everything that I'm thinking of. Sorry, Kelvin, go ahead.
Actually, I'm gonna let you have.
Everything that I'm thinking of to me is not feminine. It's just stuff that people do. So, like I said earlier, my friend who complains, she complains so much, she caused me to research it. Like I really thought, like, God, something's wrong with my friend. Like she's always complaining. And what I found out about complaining is that it changes the chemical makeup of your brain. Like whatever part, I can't remember now, but whatever part of your brain where complaints or that sort of like processing of a idea comes from starts to change. Like it physically changes because you are in practice of doing that so much. So I'm gonna say a complainer. I don't know if that's male or female though.
So let me ask you. I have a question, right? Would you consider toxic femininity to be someone that's known to accuse people? I'm not just gonna say men, people in general. So like false accusation. Would you consider that a female toxic trait?
Again, that's just a liar, right? So
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
still
so
trying to
that's what it's a
understand
liar.
what exactly toxic femininity is, because when they're giving the examples, it's I'm I'm
So
just
so so let me give this example, right? So now, who's more prone to lie to a child about, obviously, like, okay, let's just say the father's not involved for whatever reason, right? Who's the woman is
you're
more
already
likely to
making
lie
it
to the,
about the woman if the father's not
yeah,
involved.
I think
but
the question would
I'm
just be
giving you an
who's more
example
prone
though.
to giving false accusations.
By the way, I
And
just posted a link to an article that I came across, and they list like different things that could be, that could represent toxic femininity. So let's look over that. Yeah, let's take a look at that, and then maybe we could comment on some of that, and we can discuss if whether we agree or disagree or what's on the list. I just my again, the reason why I'm asking this question is because you always hear about toxic masculinity. It's a buzzword, but you just never hear about it on the other side ever.
I think
Like,
Greg is just the fact that men run the world. So like you're men run the world, and through history, men have been the regardless of who's backing them, because
hmm
women have definitely backed men's wrongdoings through history as well.
right, right.
But when you talk about the person that is usually holding the rod and swinging the sword and dishing out the punishment, it
hmm
usually is a man's hand, right?
So,
So it's gonna fall on men's court more than that. And since men still have power in society as a whole. Men still run society, no matter what. And especially if we get out of America, men definitely still run different societies. I mean, we still have places in society where women have to walk behind men for whatever strange reason that
hmm
happened in biblical times. So,
hmm
like, that's still a thing. You know,
hmm
women still have to cover themselves because a man's gaze is they don't want to tempt another man. Like, so we still live in that world in 2021. So when we start talking about toxic masculinity,
hmm
it's easy to do that, because I think the idea of masculinity and what we consider to be toxic as a
hmm
whole has been twisted and has been mutated into something that's perverse. And instead of something that's supposed to bring strength and power and protection, it's actually twisted into something that brings, like, sadness and hurt and anger. I think that's what it really that's why toxic masculinity is thrown around like it is. And women generally are play the back role, and that's why we haven't heard it. If the power dynamics in the world were differently,
hmm
I don't think we would have it. Like you said, it was a buzzword. I don't think it would be such a big buzzword, because men and women would still be sitting at the table equally, when we know for a fact that's not how it.
But the thing is, like, that buzzword is it's not really men who are promoting it. Not attacking, but it's just
No, of
facts. This
course.
is a word that this is from women. Women are promoting this. It's like us men are not calling ourselves toxic. It's a label that's been put on us. So like, where is this? Why is it on us? Like, I agree, men rule the world, but there's just certain labels that we don't give ourselves.
I think it's just women labeling the behavior that they've had to endure and continue to endure. I think that's what it is. It's just a way, instead of saying you're an asshole or you're a dick, or you being a brute, or any of these different things that women have said through the years. Toxic masculinity is just like you said. It's a buzzword,
hmm
and it is a phrase that like being called a jerk, or any of these things that people call each other through history. This is just now what women are referring to men who act a certain way as being toxic, masculinity. And I think it has went out of the realm of what it originally was made for, because now people are just saying anything that doesn't agree with them is toxic masculinity. That I'll definitely throw out there, but it definitely stems from just women, labeling it. This again is my opinion.
hmm
Women labeling what the behavior of men have been through the years, especially.
What do you all think? I'm sure you've all had a moment or two to look at this list on the article. What are your thoughts?
So I'm looking right now, and it's actually funny because like we can look at every single one of these things and think, oh, men have their own version of that. Like number one, women who slut shame. Period. That's a thing. My thing is, if somebody is, you know, practicing an unhealthy kind of sex life, and you're shaming that, then is it really wrong? That's my argument, and that would be true both ways. And like men, we don't even slut shame enough, so I don't know if we like. Yeah, that's the thing.
But can't a man or a woman slut shame?
It can, but it's
Yeah,
generally looked at differently
yeah.
because,
As
again, the
women,
way
with women would
society
be able.
is men don't get the same reaction. Men having a lot of partners is looked at as like something that you aspire to, versus women are supposed to be, virginal, and they supposed to not, like sex until they married and all this other stuff. And if you didn't have two partners, then you some kind of slut. When, oh, I didn't smash 20 chicks, well, you the man. That's just how society has had it through the years. A king could have multiple concubines, but we never heard about queens being like, oh, I got a whole harem full of dudes. We never heard
That's
about that.
true. That's facts.
I never even heard a man be called a slut. So
Oh no, women
usually
women
slut
call.
is always referred.
I
That
mean, Biggie
men
made
get
a
called
song
sluts
What
about
all
I'm
it.
the time.
saying
Remember?
is the
Remember the.
word has always been geared towards a woman.
That's
You
true.
know, if anything, you hear people say, "Oh, he's a dog." You very rarely would hear, that would be referred to a man.
I mean, Bianca,
I'm
real
not
quick.
saying people don't say it.
Remember the Junior Mafia song, with the hook. He's a slut. He's a hoe. He's a freak. I got a different girl every day of the week. Remember that one? That's the
Right,
only
I
time I
remember
could.
that.
That's the only one I remember. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, and that
and
was to a song. He was being
that
sorry.
was to a song.
That was my song. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only one I remember of a man being called a slut. I've heard men being called hoes before,
Right.
because I mean, even on, again, in a song Electric Relaxation, I know, maybe it was, yeah, Electric Relaxation. Fife Dog said, somebody called him a hoe. So yeah, that's the
Right.
only. But those are the only times that generally I hear women call men hoes.
But when they talk
As
about being a
somebody who
hoe,
as somebody who has
All
been
right,
called that,
Raquel first, and then Weston, because she started. Sorry, I got you.
um, damn, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. That wasn't my intention. But somebody who has been called that by my own wife prior to when I asked her out, she told me, hell no, hell to the no, you're a slut, you're a hoe, and all those other things. So yeah, I've seen it happen, and also it happens like quite often. Like I mean, of course, I can only speak from an individualistic perspective, as in terms of like like what I've come across, but it happens quite a lot. And then usually when it happens, the first thing you hear is like, oh well, we always call women that, we never call men that. But it actually does happen. And the thing is though, like we're saying that in terms of like it only applies to men, like, or what do you say, like, or if a woman has more than two partners or whatever, she's a slut, but a man can have all that. Is because, well, if you look at it like in nature as a whole, for the most part, and that's what, and women will tell you this, like, when listen to them, sex is very much attached to their whole being, to the person, their feelings, to the, to, like, emotionally speaking. It's usually connected to that for the most part. Again, I think for the most part, because there's always exceptions, of course, people are different, and things like that. But for men, not quite the same. Like, so because of that, it's like it's easier to associate, or to associate one with the other. To associate like, oh yeah, if a man does it, it's no big deal, so to speak. And then as opposed to with a woman, because that woman, like, for women, because of the emotional connection, there's a tie to that. And of course, like I said, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, for them, sex is attached to their emotions, whereas with men, it's attached to their anatomy.
Raquel, you remember what you were gonna say now?
I think it was when Antonia was saying that men were called hoes, I think it was. I'm trying to jog my memory. And I was saying that that was more pertaining to like not in terms of sexual. It was more like, oh, you're a punk. And so instead of saying, oh, you're a punk or whatever, they would call the guy a hoe. You know what I'm saying? Like on a block, at least where I grew up. Like on a block, they'd be like, oh yeah, you a hoe, instead of saying it in a sexual manner. Yeah,
I
understand
heard
what I'm
it used
trying to
that way
say?
before, Raquel. I heard it used that
Yeah.
way before.
So I wait, in what way? In what I said, or the other way?
Hey, yo, Greg, I read the list, and from the examples that at least that I
Mm-hmm.
saw on the BuzzFeed thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's really just it seems like a lot of the what many people are calling toxic femininity
Mm-hmm.
is women not adhering to what their gender roles are supposed to be. Like, oh, if your house ain't clean, or if you sleep around, um, or being something like a bridezilla, or
Yeah,
things of that
I
nature.
swear that I had the same comment, but I couldn't figure out how to articulate it. But to
Yeah,
me, it seems like
that
stereotypical and not so
yes.
much
Go.
like. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was sitting here all this time brewing, trying to say that same thing. Like
I
after
mean,
reading it,
yeah.
the only one that I like truly agree with is the one about, I think it's number 11. I think it says like toxic femininity is like being a Karen.
And I mean, even when it comes to Karens, are I wouldn't even put that as a toxic feminine trait, because being a Karen is realistically just being, to me, this is just for me
A
being
racist.
is a racist. So that's not
Yeah,
even like a toxic feminine trait. But like when you go down the list, you see a lot of stuff that's like, oh, okay, well, you want a big wedding, and you selfish about that, and you want it to be all about
yeah,
you, or you slut shaming, and your house ain't clean, and all these other like silly things that's really just about like other women talking about women, not having their gender roles
yeah,
in place. That's really that's what most people are calling toxic femininity. And that goes back to what I was saying initially with what Black said, which
Mm-hmm.
is when we start talking about toxic femininity and toxic masculinity, it just is based on what the gender actually does most of the time. So when we start talking about a woman is shaming another woman for not having her house clean, that is simply because generally women are supposed to be the housemakers in society and the homemakers. So if your house isn't clean and you're home all day, something is wrong with you, right? So people pointing that out, of course, you're supposed to do that stuff behind closed doors and not out in the open anyways. But it's the same as again a man beating a woman, or a man yelling and being abusive to his kids and things of that nature. And generally the male is supposed to be the disciplinary. Even when we watch shows like Good Times, Florida wasn't beating Michael or JJ or none of them. They was scared of James. James was the one
Mm-hmm.
that was going to get the belt. It wasn't Florida. Florida could have beat their ass a million times, and even after James was gone, she still wasn't laying down the law like that. It was James's role. So like, I wouldn't call James a toxic masculine man or father because he disciplined his child. He just was playing into what his gender role act.
Do you guys think that? Do you all think that toxic femininity exists, or do you think it's just
I
it
haven't
doesn't
really.
exist?
I mean, I haven't really seen an example. To me, it just looks like what we used to call in high school mean girls. Like it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't.
I have an example. And you can all tell me what you think because we spoke about this before. An example could be a woman who is a gold digger. And but what I'm gonna say is I'm gonna say specifically a woman who goes after a man for his money with the intention of taking his money and leaving. They don't really care about the man. That's toxic. Because toxic implies that you're doing some type of harm to somebody else. So I would say that's a toxic thing to do.
Let me just ask a question, and pardon me if you can't hear me very well. Um, and this is just, out of curiosity. So we just sat here and discussed this in the very beginning, the very first question in terms of like, what makes a man or woman toxic, right? And then we gave a whole bunch of traits that, in terms of like a whole bunch of traits that make somebody toxic, that makes a man toxic, makes a woman toxic, and stuff like that. And then we agree that toxic masculinity is a thing. But somehow we don't think toxic femininity is one. And I'm just trying to figure out like how. If if men and
Uh,
women both can be toxic, toxic
mhm.
masculinity is a thing, but toxic femininity is not. How?
That's
I,
where I'm going. That's exactly.
but I don't think that toxic femininity is not a thing. I don't think the gender part of it is a thing. I think human beings are toxic, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I agree
but
with
but
that.
but we, but we definitely
Human beings are
put
toxic, but toxic
we
masculinity
definitely put a label on it
is
when it comes
what
to
you
men, do we not?
see online. Is what you only see online is toxic
No,
masculinity.
no, hold on. Before we just talk about going online, you say human beings are toxic, but for men there's a label, toxic masculinity, but for a woman there isn't one.
I think that maybe there's a label because of I think Antonio said this earlier that maybe some of the things that have come from men have been so egregious and so heinous. Like there is a big difference between a woman that is slut shaming another woman and then a man that like rapes a woman. You know what I'm saying? Like because there's that big spectrum of, those two things, maybe that's the reason why masculinity gets called out
And
the way it does.
and this is why I said it's more socially acceptable for for um for the world to label men with bad labels, or for society to hate men, or whatever the case is. It's more socially acceptable. Opposed to women, it's not.
But funny that you say that because I think it was Antonio too that said men run the world. So if if it's more socially acceptable to call out men, isn't that just men doing that? Why don't y'all change it since y'all run the world?
That's what I was saying. It's like we're not calling ourselves toxic. So, but I do agree with Antonio. Men do rule the world,
Hmm.
but I guess we don't rule what we're being labeled.
I mean, but that's also just because women generally have I mean, that's why most men don't like to argue with women, because women generally have been more articulate, and more in control of their emotions, and be able to actually get out their emotions without necessarily having to yell and argue, per se.
Whoa, hold on,
Not
hold on, hold
saying,
on, hold on,
listen
hold on,
and
hold on.
listen, hold on, let me
Here they
finish the
Oh
come.
statement.
gosh.
Hold on, let me finish the statement. Let me finish the statement. Am I saying that women don't argue and yell and all that stuff? Of course not, because we know that's not true. But when we talk about the general consensus, men don't usually know how to express their emotions other than anger.
Hmm.
That's historically factual. That's not an opinion. That's a fact, right? Factual that men usually react in anger first. First, that's historically documented through history that a man gets upset and he does something in anger towards someone, whether it be another man or a woman, right? That's historically, right? Do we agree? Yes or no?
Yes,
Yes.
I agree
So,
I
because
agree.
so with that
anger
being
is
the case,
masculine.
that's why I'm saying that generally women have had to be able to say, not only control their emotions but also articulate what is going on in the situation, not only just because of the power dynamics, but just like, again, how they were raised. You know what I'm saying? Generally, that's how. It's plenty of articulate men. You're listening to one, so I know how to control my emotions. But generally, I think that's where at the age where we're at right now, like with internet and shit like that, when we really want to talk about it, women run Twitter and shit like that. Men don't run Twitter. Am I wrong with that? I'm not on Twitter like that, but women run Twitter. Yes or no?
They run social
Mm,
media. I
Mm.
guess you would
I
say
don't know.
Women,
social
so
media as well.
women run social media. Like, let's be honest about the situation. Women run social media regardless of what they're posting. Women run social media, right? Most men don't even like to talk a lot. Like,
Hmm.
that's generally, and I'm just talking
That's
about
true.
black people. Black people generally, men don't like to damn girl, can you just shut up, you talk all the time. Like, that's a thing that's been in movies, countless movies and all this other shit. Oh, we just want you to shut the fuck up while we play the game. That's a thing that's in countless memes and shit like that, right? So women articulate themselves better. So of course, if they're the ones that are actually running social media, you're gonna see for a change, you're gonna see that shit pop up versus before social media and and the internet, you never heard about no toxic masculinity. You just never even heard about
That's
that
true
shit.
too.
You just never heard about it. It wasn't even a thing. It like those two words, toxic and masculinity, was not even two words that you combine together. Toxic was only for waste. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's
what
why.
what can men do to change the perception?
It can't. It can't. It's never gonna happen. Come on now. History. History. Let's
Yeah,
talk about history. It's never gonna change. History historically, people are the same people. So take men and women off the shit. Men and women are always gonna just be people. Are always gonna be fucked up. People are gonna be toxic, and that goes back to what Greg was trying to say. Is we women and to answer you real quick, Greg,
Mm-hmm.
women definitely can be toxic
Right, right.
in their femininity. They definitely can be because men can be toxic in their masculinity. But the general consensus of what is called toxic femininity is generally just gender, roles. But anyways, yeah, go ahead. Somebody.
Gotcha. Wetson, you were saying something, I think, before.
Oh, wait, are we talking
If
about?
if he's not there, then anyone else can speak.
Uh, okay. I'm gonna say, I kind of like it sometimes how we're at this point in time where women are so much more represented in media and around the world to where we can make up a term such as toxic femininity and it can be brought up by other girls. Like a lot of these people who added on to that list you provided us, Greg. They were girls talking about how toxic girls can be, and it actually took me back to something about my own girlfriend. Like she and I talk about this a lot. Women hate each other, man. You girls sometimes you won't even know each other at all. You'll know each other for less than a minute, look at each other and be like, "Fuck this bitch." Like it's weird. That's a thing. Uh,
Mm, okay.
Reading the that article, it also occurs to me that men can sort of be like toxic, I guess, at any point. What it, it, they can like be toxic individually, but women, according to this article, I'm not saying this is a fact, but the way the article um plays it out is like women are toxic when they come together. When we get together, we start being toxic to one another.
I could see that, and
Right.
and
That's
and
why I said Mean Girls. That's why I was
yeah,
like, this. It takes me back to high school when people would say, "Oh, they're Mean Girls."
Right.
reality TV has put that on display too. Toxic fem, like realistically, the
Yes.
yeah, all the
Yes.
reality
Now that's a
shows.
good example
Yeah,
of toxic femininity, reality
but I mean
TV.
that's a
Oh yeah,
uh,
all the Real Housewives.
yeah.
You could that's all based on toxic femininity. You could
I
argue
mean,
that,
you definitely
even though
could.
it's entertaining.
I mean, but see, if we break that down, like, what is it that's toxic about that, right? You have loud women that are being ignorant in public, right? Not caring. That this is what I had said it when I first jumped in. Is you're not caring about everyone around you. So I'm out here throwing glasses and drinks and shit like that. That means I'm not caring about anyone that's around me. I'm throwing stuff. I'm yelling. I'm saying whatever. That means I don't care like how I'm being portrayed, especially since I know I'm on TV and I'm trying to fight. I think fighting in public, realistically, at this point in time, is just it shows that
Ridiculous.
you want how strong.
It's almost like a lot of these women, they bring the worst out of each other. Some
Well,
of
that's what it
them,
was saying. That's
not
I
what it
mean,
was
all.
it's
saying, though, Greg. It's like
scripted,
when
y'all.
women
It's
get
like
together, they get catty. That's what Calvin was saying. Is that women automatically go into defense as soon as they see another woman, which that goes back to that's another thing that happened a long time ago where women were men get to choose and women get chosen, and that's a big thing that'll make the cattiness automatically come into it because regardless of whatever, that's still.
but that it's a show too. They're getting paid for that. Like it's all scripted.
Interesting.
So it's not like they're
It's not.
unfortunately doing
It's
that.
not all scripted. The conversation that they're having is real. The fact that they meet up in those places and talk about these particular problems is scripted. But
yeah.
the
And the
things that
fights, they already know they're
The
gonna pop off.
storyline, the
They're gonna pop
storyline is
off.
scripted. But as far as like
yeah,
the
the
fight,
storyline
that you
is
can't script a
scripted.
fight. The storylines are
No, what I'm
scripted,
What
saying
but
is
I
they
always
are.
find
Yes, you can script the fight. They know they're gonna pop off. It's kind of like when you watch Jerry Springer. You knew they were gonna fight. somebody's gonna get to point and they were gonna fight. Like it's
But
always
that's the scripted part about it, that you're bringing them together. If me and you, Bianca, have a problem, more than likely we're not going to see each other. But what makes a reality show is that a producer has now brought you and me to the same place to talk out our problems.
And
In real life,
alcohol.
we
Let's
would
have
never
big
meet up.
glasses too. Big glasses of alcohol too.
right.
And
But what I'm
right, and add alcohol to that, which is funny because I've been in arguments with women. I've never thrown a drink. No one has ever thrown a drink at me. I always get mad when people use that characteristic to describe women because it's never happened to me. I always think it's just very weird that they're throwing drinks, but whatever.
I'll
so
say this much. Oh,
Raven.
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry,
I was
Raven.
gonna say, so a lot of reality TV show fans are usually too cool for pro wrestling, but I will say this much: they're so similar, bro. Like they're all characters. Oh yes, you get it, Antonio. They're all characters, and so the line gets blurred very quickly and easily when it comes to what's real and what's
They
fake.
even got entrances, Calvin. They even got entrances. When
Hmm.
Nene would walk in on Real Housewives of Atlanta, which was the only one I ever really watched, like she had like an entrance, kind of almost like she was the Rock or some shit like that. But
Wow.
yeah, you got.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, you got it. And I remember this one scene I saw where this one girl just walked into a room and just called everyone raggedy. That's an entrance.
Well, the Bad Girls Club
Mhm.
is the that is a what I would call a toxic femininity show. Like that's a if I don't know if y'all have ever seen that show
Yeah,
before.
Yeah,
that
I've
show
seen
is
that one.
That
really
that is
about
what I would
the
call
fight.
so
They
so
wanted
so
to fight.
so then now what we so let me ask y'all this then. So when we talk about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, really what we're talking about is the worst aspects of being a man or a woman. Can we
Mhm.
agree on that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Definitely.
So that's what I think that's what when we talk about.
Against what a woman's supposed to be. Like a woman's supposed to be quiet. She's not supposed to be loud. These women are so it goes
Yeah,
against it. But whereas for men, it's more so them being masculine, but hyper masculine.
but see, okay. I mean, I can
There's
agree with
hyper
that.
feminism too. I've seen that too. Like when I was looking at articles before we started this, I'm like looking it up, and when I put in toxic femininity, hyper femininity came up too.
But
That
would
buzzword.
y'all call
That's
would y'all call two men loud in the street being like is that considered and like we about to fight and we squaring off and yelling and screaming and shit like that? I look at that as ignorance. I don't look at that as masculine at all. I look at that as actually fake
True.
masculinity. As a matter of
True.
fact, I look at that as false. So again, I think when we really think about what we're talking about when it comes to toxicity, as people, as human beings, when we put the label of masculine and feminine on it, we're really talking about the worst of what a gender has to offer. Generally, women aren't known to be fighting in the street, right? But if men fight in the street, we looking at that as toxic. Like, why are y'all fighting in the street? Why can't y'all talk it out like men? Is what they say. Act like a man. Talk it out like men. Why can't you talk it out like men? Why do you have to be out here, pounding on your chest like two gorillas? Why you gotta act like animals in the street? And with women, it's the same thing. Why you got to act catty? You know what I'm saying? Why you got to get loud and ignorant? We automatically resort to animalistic and not human. I think that's when we start talking about toxic things is taking a situation to the worst possible aspect that it can be for a man or a woman that generally would be in that situation. AI like gold digging. My roommate is a fucking gold digger. He plays women all the goddamn time. But it's generally not a consensus that men are the ones that actually do that, since generally men have been the ones that end up making all the money. So you don't hear about the stories of men, but there's
They
tons
out
of
there though.
but
oh yeah.
Those men are
I
out
again,
there.
there's
think the
tons
term
of
is called gigolo.
I was about to say there's tons of songs called "I'm Just a." Van Halen made David Lee Roth made a "I'm Just a Gigolo," and
Hmm.
Prince made a motherfucking song about being a gigolo. Like, I mean, so like again, it's just it's out there. People just forget.
Hey, Rock. Anything you want to add? Welcome back to the stage, or to the table, I should say. Anything you want to add, or you just want to listen?
I'm here. I'm listening in. I'm just listening.
All right. Cool. 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 Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna say
No, no, no. I was gonna say if I guess we could I guess we could go around and Unless anybody has any other rebuttals, we could just give like I'll give everyone like an opportunity to give their final thoughts. As we come to a close. There's no final thought question. It's just your final thoughts overall um, on the topic. I'll give everybody like a minute. Yeah, let's do that. Whoever starts, I'm not gonna give any order. Whoever starts, when you
I was
finish,
about to
just
say, Greg, why don't you just
just.
start from top to bottom, from
I
top to
was I
top?
was gonna I was gonna experiment with the mic
Oh,
passing,
go
but we
for
could
it.
do that. We could do that. Uh, t- and I think everybody's screen is different too. Depending on if they refreshed
I
and
was about to say,
stuff.
just pull
Um,
down.
right, right. Let's start with Ty, and then all right. So let's remember the order. Let me do it this way. It's gonna be Ty, and then Watson, Pierre, Rock, Zeze, um, Kelvin, Bianca, and then Antonio. You'll close things out.
My final thought, I'm just gonna reiterate that I don't think that and you know what, everybody made some great points tonight, and but I still don't think that there is a such thing as a toxic femininity or masculinity. I think people are toxic. I think again, as I said, that we all have trauma, growing up or, whatever. And these things manifest themselves in certain behaviors that we exhibit, sadly, unfortunately, to the people that we love the most. And, the best thing that you can do is like notice that about yourself and either just stop it or, try to get some help, try to figure out why you going down that path. That's it.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you, Ty, for joining us tonight, and thank you for sharing your final thoughts.
Of course.
Watson was telling me he was having some mic issues. So, Watson, are you there? Can you hear me? Going once, going twice. All right, Pierre.
Not really final thoughts. I just enjoyed the
Oh, your
topic, different
your phone is
perspectives.
breaking up.
Um, Definitely. Can you guys hear me?
Uh, Not too well. I guess we'll come back to you. Rock. Final thoughts.
I know I had to bounce in and out. I was actually finishing up a Zoom meeting, but I know that we were talking about the toxic of men and women, and I know that my thing was on manipulation and jealousy and how it affects relationships, whatever like that. I wish I could have spent a lot of more time on it. I wish I could have spent a lot of more time on it now. But I'm getting more and more engaged into the group as this probably be the first time you guys probably heard my voice, except probably Beyonce and you, Greg. But other than that, it's blessed to be here, and you'll hear more from me as the group grows on.
All right, no problem. Thank you for joining us, and I definitely agree. Manipulation, and I think you said something else, but yeah, both men and women can be manipulated.
Jealousy.
So, yeah, and jealousy. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's toxic for both. So, I agree with you on that, and thank you again. Who did I say was next? Kelvin, I think. Yeah, Kelvin. Yeah.
Zezé dipped, so
Oh yeah.
I'm
Yep.
next.
You have to go.
Uh, so Rock, enjoy your party, bro. Sounds lit. Um, I'm gonna say for my closing statement, I think we can all agree, basically, everyone's got their toxic traits. And I think now that we are not only discussing toxic masculinity, but also femininity, that makes the conversation a lot more not only inclusive and even, but then it also gives us more to address, and as a result, more to resolve. But I think for right now, um, it's in everyone's best interest to find the answers to those questions from within. Because we don't have the big solutions to humanity's big, weird behavioral problems yet. And most of us can't really afford that talk therapy stuff. It's really expensive. But thanks for the convo, guys. It was great hearing you.
No problem. And thank you for joining us again. Uh, you made some great points. Um, let's go to Bianca, and then we'll try Pierre one more time, and then we'll close out with.
Another great conversation with everybody. Yeah, I didn't really get a lot of examples of toxic femininity, but I'm not saying that it's not out there. But I just think that the reason why we hear more about toxic masculinity is because we have more examples of it for so long. And then that was a term, that women gave because of the behavior. And some of it can go towards mental health and certain unresolved childhood issues and stuff that we're all talking about now. And hopefully everybody can reflect on it and see, not in this group, just saying in general, and trying to take better care of ourselves and heal whatever wounds we have so we can be the best that we can be just in life and in any relationships that we enter into.
Okay, very well said. Thank you for joining us again, Bianca, as always. Happy to have you. And Pierre, let's try you again. I know you had some issues, but
I would say this was a great discussion tonight. Definitely appreciate the different perspective. And,
okay, all right,
and now
all
somebody was
right,
in the background. I don't know if you guys heard that,
okay.
but I
Close
was
us out 30 seconds.
yeah, but I was saying appreciate the different perspective, and hope we could just continue this conversation and gain knowledge from each other.
All right, perfect, perfect. Thank you, man. Thank you, Pierre and Antonio. Glad you made it, man. It's always a pleasure to have you. What are your final?
Um, you know, it's one of those things where uh, different strokes for different folks, right? Different people are going to see it different ways. That's the joy of living life. But like it's been said multiple times, at this point now in 2021, we're definitely talking about trauma, which is a big thing, especially in the Black and Brown community that we don't talk about. We're talking about hurt feelings that haven't been resolved. We can openly talk about therapy. That's a big thing. People need to communicate. I think we're all old enough to remember the Smokey the Bear commercials. Only you can prevent forest fires. So I would say that when we start talking about toxic masculinity and femininity and just being a human in general, it starts with us and it starts with our circle. So I would urge everybody to look at their circle. If you see people that are being what you would consider toxic, talk to them about it, pull them up about it, because all that's doing is allowing that to spread not only in your circle, but it's allowing it to spread in the world. So I just hope that everybody has a good rest of their week. And
Perfect, perfect. And I'll close this out. I think it's important for anyone, especially as you get older, you get more mature. When we're younger, when we're teenagers in our 20s, we don't understand certain things. But when we're in our 30s, going into our 40s and beyond, I feel like before we get into a serious committed relationship, it's important for us to do some personal self work. Whether that's going to therapy and just have self reflection and be aware of what your triggers are and just work on yourself because yes, nobody's perfect, but the worst thing you want to do is get into a committed relationship trying to build with someone if you have some instability and certain things that you need to work on for yourself. And I feel like a lot of times relationships have issues because people didn't work on themselves first before they got into it. So I feel like the more we work on ourselves before getting into relationships, the better off we will be. So those are my closing thoughts. And thank you once again for everyone who participated. Thank you for everyone who's listening. And I hope to see you all again soon. And I hope you have a good night. Thank you for checking out Open Table Discussions. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to this channel and also hit the bell notification to be alerted when the next show is posted. Also, visit tablechatter.com if you'd like to make a donation and follow me on Instagram at tablechatter and DM me if you'd like to say hello or be a participant on a future episode. Also, please make sure to check out the other shows on this channel that you can access from the playlist tab, which include Debate Boss, Table of Cinema, Table Advice, Sports Table Talk, and the Table Chatter Report coming soon.